Good evening. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Design Review Committee on Thursday, August 15th, 2024. I now call the meeting to order at 5:04 p.m. Lisa, roll call, please.
Member Lapp?
Here.
Member Kavanaugh?
Here.
Member Martin?
Yes.
Vice Chair Dryden-Hess?
Here.
Chair Jacobson-Bates?
Here. Okay, good to have everybody present. Member Lapp, you missed last time. Would you lead the Pledge of Allegiance today?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for doing that. Can I have a motion to approve the order of the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second?
Yes.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Lisa, roll call vote again?
Member Lapp?
Yes.
Member Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Member Martin?
Yes.
Vice Chair Dryden-Hess?
Yes.
Chair Jacobson-Bates?
Yes. Okay, we're going to move on to consent items. Lisa again.
Items on consent are typically routine and will be approved in one motion. The chair will call on anyone wishing to address the committee on any consent item on the agenda which has not been pulled by the committee for discussion. Each speaker will be permitted to speak only once, and comments will be limited to a total of 3 minutes.
Okay, we're going to start with in-person comments on the consent agenda. Any comments in the room? Anyone wishing to speak on Zoom? Okay, then I guess I will close the public comments, and we'll move on to non-agenda items. Yep, excuse me. But first, we need to have a motion. First of all, is there any, no comments here? Then we're going to ask for a motion to approve the agenda consent items.
So moved. Second.
Okay, got a first and a second after a fumble on that that move there. Lisa, roll call vote, please.
Member Lapp?
Yes.
Member Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Member Martin?
Yes.
Vice Chair Dryden-Hess?
Yes.
Chair Jacobson-Bates?
Yes. Okay, so now we move on to public communications for non-agenda items. Again, Lisa, please introduce.
The committee welcomes your input. At this time, you may address the committee on items that are not on the agenda. The time limit is 3 minutes.
Okay, we're going to start with in-person public comments first. I see nobody in the room. Does anyone on Zoom wish to speak on non-agenda items? I don't see any hand raised. Okay, so then we will move on to discussion items. So staff, please introduce 4A and provide the report.
A little game change here. So you have discussion and possible action regarding land use permit for 436 Alisol, APN 139240084 for proposed exterior door paint color. The proposed project is categorically exempt from CEQA.
Okay, we're going to start with public comments. We'll start with anyone wishing to speak in person on this item. And I have been informed by staff that the applicants are on vacation tonight, so they weren't able to be here. Seeing nobody in the room, is there anybody on Zoom who wishes to speak on this item? Okay, I don't see anybody there, so at this point then, we'll go on to comments from we'll close this and bring it back to the committee for discussion. Does anyone on the committee have any comments on this?
I have a comment. It's on there, it's listed as a recommendation regarding this application, I guess. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I have a comment, I guess, regarding the what's called a recommendation, that you really don't have a recommendation there so much as options for the board. And I want to know, do you have, I mean, I assume you have an option, the option is to approve it as presented. Okay.
Any other comments on this item? Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve is submitted.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Lisa, roll call vote, please.
Member Lapp?
Yes.
Member Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Member Martin?
Yes.
Vice Chair Jordan Hess?
Yes.
Chair Jacobson Bates?
Yes. Okay, we're going to move on to item 4B. Staff, can you please provide the report?
So discussion and possible action regarding a land use permit for 1677 and 1679 Copenhagen Drive, APN 139182013, for proposed exterior paint color. The proposed project is categorically exempt from CEQA. And I do have a PowerPoint for this one.
I have a tiger.
So this is the current building frontage that faces Copenhagen Drive. The applicant is going to be updating the colors on the face of the building. The primary color will be that yellow. It's called Eye of the Tiger. The half timbers will be brown. They're going to be painting the attic doors, the hinges, and then the storefront doors right here and the window trim as well. It's for two of the buildings that are right next to each other. And this is categorically exempt from CEQA. That is it.
Okay, are there any questions of staff regarding this? Okay, I'll move on to public comments. Anyone wishing to speak on this in the room? And I know the applicant's here. I'm not sure if you have any words you'd like to add to the report.
No, I don't really have any more to add to it. Yeah, I was just trying to come up with a yellow which fits more into some of the you use in Denmark. And I tried to get Art Alvarez to come up with a color, so we got it from San Ynez Valley Paint. They come up with a color. So this is what we would like to have it now. It's there was yellow before, but it's, of course, it's faded. It's about 11 years ago since it's been painted. And this will fade too, there's no question about that. But this is what we would like to see, yeah. Other than that, we haven't really changed any color except for mostly the brown and the yellow. The red, the gray, and the white is the same, yeah.
I do have a question for you. The white remains around the windows, around the window and door area? Is that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I had not understood that, but thanks for clarifying.
Just a comment. Maybe the gray should be a little bit darker. It's look contemporary.
Hold that, and we will do public comments and then come back, okay? All right, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other public comments? I don't see anything in the room. Anybody on Zoom that wishes to speak on this? Okay, so public comment is now closed. I'll bring the item back to the committee for discussion. Mary Vaughn.
I like the color, it's good, but maybe the gray is too contemporary.
Mike.
Oh, put it down a little
It's
bit, like this.
Sorry, merci. Oui, I would do the gray a little bit old looking. It's look too new to me, but no big deal.
Anybody else have comments?
I did. I saw that they had painted a swatch, and that color is certainly not appealing to my eye. I thought that the curry, which is the other swatch from the other project, would be much more applicable and a little bit happier feeling. Thank you.
Any other comments? I'm looking at the color and thinking about the historical colors that I see in many of the books about Denmark and historic Copenhagen color palettes, and that kind of ochre color is really old world Danish and really common. And maybe it isn't quite as happy of a color. And I did miss the color painted when I walked by the other day, so I didn't get to see that.
I did.
Yeah. Well, do you have any comments then?
No, I would echo what you just said, which is if there was ever a consistent palette that was in the book, this is it. So
Yeah.
I'm like, bravo, like, done.
Yeah. And I also know that the applicant spends a bit of time in Denmark and has some history there. So do we have a motion?
I can bring a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay. Lisa, roll call vote, please.
Member Lapp?
No.
Member Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Member Martin?
Yes.
Vice Chair Dreyden-Hess?
Yes.
Chair Jacobson Bates?
Yes. I do have a question regarding the roofing. I know that that had been discussed, and I believe that the roofing the roof choices, or the roof is being redone. Maybe the applicant, wants to just update me. He says yes. Okay. Okay, so there's a new roof coming on it as well. Okay, thank you. And I do appreciate the comments of our committee here. Sometimes we don't agree, but we're all here championing Solvang, so that's what's important. So thank you. All right, and thank you for being present. So now we move on to our big homework here, which is item 4C. All right. Introduce if you would, please, staff.
Discussion and provide direction on potential zoning ordinance amendments, design district overlay zones.
Bear with me here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bent. Technical problems, bear with us as we get the report prepared to be shared.
So I quit.
What of this chair?
Bear with me for a minute.
For our viewers out in the internet world, just to let you know that we're handling some technical challenges as we prepare, staff prepares to
Do you want
share
to
the
take
report.
I would recommend at this point, do you want to adjourn for a quick break?
Sure.
5 minutes?
Take a brief recess. We can take a
Yes.
recess.
Yeah, we'll take a break at 5:20 and be back in the room at 5:25. Would that be adequate time? Yes. Okay, so we are adjourned for
We're
5
going to
minutes.
take a recess. so-
Excuse me, we are recessed for 5 minutes.
you want to bring us back into recess or back in session.
Okay, we are officially ending the recess and back in session for the Design Review Committee, and we will resume with item 4C and the staff report.
Thank you. Again, I apologize for the technical difficulties. I was given a computer that's not very functional now. So before you this evening is a potential zoning ordinance amendments. So this is sort of the last of our sort of study session, workshop, call it what you want. But ultimately, the product that's, what is discussed this evening gets the last changes, and that product now pulls forward to the Planning Commission in September. And so for those that do not know, there is a lovely new bill, or chaptered bill by the state legislature last year that requires cities, when they adopt a general plan, to adopt a conforming zoning ordinance within 180 days. So considering our track record of meeting deadlines, it's very pertinent that we meet this deadline. So hence why the speed of which this is going. So again, just a primer of things. Our last zoning ordinance adoption, and I'm going to say this time ad nauseum, done in 1990. It's relatively stayed the same. Again, the image there on your left-hand side of the screen is the good old typewriter version of it, double-spaced and all. The image on the right-hand side of the screen is from the interwebs, or the internet, as we like to call it. It's virtually the same. The only difference is the cool type font. Other than that, not much has changed, except we can do hyperlinks and fun things like that. So the way entitlement processing runs in the city is through, and I've created this chart because this entitlement processing, it's confusing. Folks sometimes don't understand it because it's, what is a permit, what is not. So overall, we have the 2045 Solvang General Plan, which, by the way, is in effect as of today, or it's been in effect but wasn't sued. So we're actually all in the clear on that one now. And so the Solvang General Plan is our overarching document. And you can see that's the very top. And so this is very much a top-down approach. So that star at the end is project completion. Ultimately, in the end, it has to meet that general plan or be consistent with the general plan with some few minor exceptions. Below that is the Solvang Municipal Code, specifically Chapter 11, the zoning ordinance. We do have an offshoot that exists, and that's the Village Estate Specific Plan. That's was chaptered back in 1991, and so the specific plan kind of sits on its own. The area has all been built out, but it technically is still codified, so it sits there as an outlier to the zoning ordinance. What implements the zoning ordinance are what we call permit application types. So the city currently has a few of these. Those are conditional use permits and variances. It's pretty rare that we see a variance come through, but it is allowed. CUPs are considered use permits. The second one are what our code currently calls as development plans, but it's simply the way it's written today. It's simply a plan. There's no underlying permit that goes with it, which is a really odd duck. It's an oddball thing. And then the next one is subdivisions. That, again, has its own set of conditions, et cetera. And then the last one is this, what we call land use permits. And then I have a proposed zoning clearance. So the land use permit is actually the overarching system to which our city utilizes. It actually was, it's still utilized in the county because we took it from the county. We just never modified it. So that sort of controls a lot of our stuff. Once you get that entitlement or any of the four circles, then you go on to what's called building permits. There is one sort of exception is some land use permits technically don't require a building permit. A great example is what you just saw this evening. The painting of the door and the painting of the building facade from a California building permit perspective, those don't require a building permit. So therefore, once they paint it, it's a completed project. So that's one of the rare exceptions where a land use permit doesn't necessarily have the next step and next action, which is the building permit. So that's why you see that dashed line there that sort of represents those type of applications that come through. And again, this is what our current code looks like. It'll look hopefully very similar in the future. So again, the framework for potential amendments, it's one of our city council primary goals for the 2024-26 fiscal year is to streamline the entitlement and building process. General plan is just the framework of that. It's the policy document that lays out the roadmap. The commission has provided direction from staff in May and June. This DRC body provided direction in July. And so we're coming back to you on that. Again, some of the text amendments that we're proposing is to create clear implementation language, including what's to occur for determinations, what's to occur for appeals, processing, and establish time limits for processing. So that currently is non-existent in our code. A great example is we have a hotel that's sitting on the vacant lot in right next to Nyborg Estates off of Mission. It was approved back in 2020. We are now, or excuse me, 2019. We are now in 2024. It's going to be up for another essentially another time extension. So again, this is now almost a 5-year-old project. Our code stays completely silent about when an entitlement can end. We as a municipality have every right to say, you know what, you got to get it all done in 5 years. You got to start construction, et cetera. None of that exists. The other issue in our zoning code is definitions, which is basically the crux of our code. We have quite a numerous number of pages of definitions. These definitions vary from what is a cemetery to what is building height. And even then, building height's a good example of it. It talks about, building heights typically you're defined it, like what's point to, what is building height? The building height is the topmost of the building. That should just be the definition. Or punt to the actual code. Our code actually includes the entire reg in the definitions, and then there's nothing else in the zoning code. So if you don't, if us as a practitioner or as a developer picks that up, unless you kind of knew that little nuance, and I actually didn't know that nuance for a good 3 months, that, our definitions sometimes hold actual regulations, which it shouldn't. It should just plainly define what you're looking at. So, we're looking to revamp a lot of our definitions. Along with those definitions, those are uses as well that define uses. So we're looking to modernize and revamp those as well. And then finally, provide allowable uses and development standards in a clear and concise manner. This is actually one of the bigger things in our code. A great example is conditional use permits. If you were to walk in, Chris, to say, hey, I'm as a homeowner, I'm looking to do a bowling alley on my property. I have to look at your property, and let's say it was commercial. Not only do I have to look at the commercial code, but there's actually 3 additional sections that I got to look at, which is really odd because one is back in permit administration, one is in the front, and the other one is sitting in the own supplemental language. So I got 3 locations that potentially could allow that to be. Really, it should just be one and one only. Again, this is ease of use. This is just being able, the ability to provide information to residents, property owners, et cetera, what they can and can't do on their property in a very easy manner. That currently doesn't exist in our code. And then the development standards themselves. You have some development standards. A great example is landscaping. Landscaping also exists in 3 locations, particularly in the village area. The landscaping standards are under the TRC. They're under their landscaping plan section, and then they're under permit and procedures. It makes no sense. And I'll tell you why it does that, because we've just added on and not really organized it the way it should be. So in most cases, we've taken a look at the allowable uses and the development standards, and in most cases, some of those development standards have began to be relaxed. With a few minor exceptions, and I'm going to throw it out here right now. Our single-family residential zones actually have a height limit of 35 feet, which is really, it's kind of shock. It's high. It's very high. Why? I don't know. The only answer I've been able to track is that's what the county did back then. So we let it go, which it kind of makes sense if we were a rural community, but we're not. We're kind of mixed of the two. So it's one of those things where, those heights and those standards have a lot of ramifications, particularly when it comes to ADU construction, et cetera. That means someone can do a 30-foot ADU if they wanted to on a second-story addition. And so that's not compatible. So that sort of standard has not been relaxed. It's actually dropped back to sort of make sense. 25 feet, that you can get a 2-story building in a 25-foot threshold. That's not, it's pretty easy. But for the most cases, it's been relaxed, and then it's been relaxed in other commercial zones, et cetera. So That's what we're looking at for the development standards. Other text amendments are just, and I don't even know if this isn't even the right presentation. So other examples include text amendments, that were done in the text amendments that were completed in supplemental regulation, et cetera. What you're looking for this evening is text amendments, particularly in our TRC. So specifically, these overlay zone concepts. So in your staff report, we discussed the idea of an overlay zone and what those are. And then the other thing that I did hit on was this idea of review authority, which on page in your staff report, we went into detail of what is a review authority, because again, right now in our code, it's not clearly defined. So we went ahead and defined that. And then based on obviously the descriptions based on the discussion in July, we removed some language. And then what we're really trying to do is, rather than peg it a review authority, which could be the DRC, could be the Planning Commission, City Council, rather than peg it on the project type, we're pegging it to the application type. So if you're the review authority for a general plan amendment, it's certainly not the DRC, it's the City Council. That's in review authorities who actually approves the application themselves. So, which is why a zoning code amendment is the same thing. The review authority ultimately is the council. The recommender is the planning commission. And in our proposed ordinance, if the zoning code amendment has anything to do with development standards, then it comes to you. So and again, that's currently not in our code, because it makes sense that some of the development standards go through the design review committee for recommendation to the planning commission, or at least get some sort of recognition to there. And again, also recognizing that we are changing some of our entitlements. So again, the land use permit is proposed to disappear. That's going to be replaced with the zoning clearance, and the zoning clearance then will have certain actions that would be allowed. So additions to existing dwelling units, that's now would be done through zoning clearance. Additions to existing multi-unit dwellings, zoning clearance. And so what ultimately in the end, the zoning clearance is done at a staff level. Some things to note that we did put in the language is changes of non-residential space for up to 4 units. That would also be done at a zoning clearance, but the biggest caveat is there's no new outside construction. We're talking a pure inside conversion. And then the other caveat is if they have to do a modification for ingress and egress, which means is exiting and entering to meet the building code standards. So we're talking second floor conversions, particularly in the TRC or in the village. If those flip to residential, as long as it's 4 and under, it will just go to the zoning clearance. But again, if they're triggering additional improvements outside those facades, then it's got to go through the development permit process. And then also proposed re-roofs based on the objective design standards. Again, re-roofs should be fairly rudimentary. Majority of them are already done over the counter. Those could continue. But again, if it meets the objective standard, then off it should go. City staff can approve it. If they're looking at doing something that isn't of the objective standard, then they're able to come to you. And you as the body, after city staff analyzes it and gives us the reason and rationale, you as a body then can have a public hearing in regards to it. You can hear the applicant, and then guess what? Now you have 3 findings that you need to make. And so it gives city staff the ability to vet things straight up, which right now we do not have that vetting mechanism. And I can't express that more. And so these objective standards really allow us to have that mechanism. The second one is the last bullet, is proposed repaintings within these development overlays, as long as they adhere to a color palette and schemes that are adopted in what we call the design handbook. And so that is actually, once this is all adopted, that is the next phase. Right now we have a set of design guidelines. The ultimate vision is to repeal those guidelines and then start over with a development handbook. And that handbook then helps to flush out is able to help do a little bit of interpretation of what's in the objective design standards and provide these color palettes. This was a great discussion earlier about colors. One member did not like the color, and other members did like the color. These are discussions where if you had just a palette, you're able
Exactly.
to provide someone the ability to move forward. And if they don't like the palette, guess where they get to go to? Y'all. Yeah, it's pretty simple. And a lot of property owners, that they stop at our counter and they ask, well, what colors would you like to see? I don't know. Lisa and myself and the other staff members, we can give as much advice, to which we have done that before in the past, where we've given advice to say, you know what, based on what you're proposing, and based on our understanding of the DRC and what we've heard from the DRC members on other previous projects, this may not necessarily be something that they are into, to which then certain designers will start defending that. And then our ability to sort of not necessarily fight back, but our ability to, well, give them a good rhyme and reason and rationale. And hence they'll give you a good rhyme and reason and rationale and may be able to give you a great knockout presentation about why these colors should be what they are. And then when they ultimately paint them and they're darker than they need to be, we end up looking like the bad folks. Now, if we had a color palette that was ready off the shelf and we say, hey, these color palettes have been fully vetted by our DRC and city staff members, and this is what we're looking for, and hey, we understand we don't want color repetition, so we put into the design handbook that one color can't be right next to the next color, and you still want to go through it, be my guest. But they have to make these 3 findings. Tell them how they're going to make those findings. You need to made that argument. Again, that provides certainty. I can't stress this enough. Design objectives give people certainty. They give people an expectation. They give city staff the largest amount of expectation. It gives us the largest bully stick we know possible to take something in and say, this does not meet our town's standard, our minimum standard. Go redo it. And on top of that, it gives a designer a starting point. It gives them the ability to say, okay, this is their expectation, so now I have to go do that expectation, versus the typical discussion at this counter, and this has been the discussion since I started, is what do you like to see? I don't know. Obviously, my difference of design opinion differs because I'm looking at it from a guideline policy standpoint, and I'm looking at it from an economic development hat. I'm looking at it from way more hats than this review authority looks at, and other hats than the planning commission looks at, and other hats that the city council looks at. So you got to give somewhere a start, and that's where the objective standards provide sort of that start. Now, we did take in comments for those objective standards. And some of those, and we did incorporate changes to the objective standards. So let me just go over what they were. And so we did revise the purpose statement. We revised the definition of mixed-use project to cover all the underlying zones. We did eliminate the outdoor dining areas as an ability to break up facades, because that is recognized that those could disappear. And so we don't want those to disappear. We added color hues to bricks and half timbering. Eliminated granite stone, decreased the minimum overhangs to 12 inches, eliminated the use of stone as alternative to decorate brackets, adjusted maximum pitch to roof for 60 degrees. We eliminated the shutters are encouraged, added minimum railing heights for faux rails that aren't used as private open space, because it was imagined that, hey, the railings, they're at minimum that meet the building code, but it was dawned that, hey, people may put railings on that are just faux railings, and that's all right too. And then made changes to lighting, including maximum height poles. We reduced that to 15 feet, except where a building code requires a higher pole. And again, those little caveats need to be thrown in, because we aren't the driver of the California Building Code. That is the state of California. And then eliminated sort of that review authority section that we had discussed and that brought some comments on. So I'm kind of done with my spiel. I'm going to turn it over to you as a DRC. But again, this does need to move forward. And there is more urgency put onto this. And again, not only because we will meet well within our 180 days, we will meet that. That's not the issue. The issue is that for every day that this body and for every day that the Planning Commission City Council does not take action on this, is just another day that a developer can come in with an application and bring that in and still play under some of the old rules. And members of this committee who have been participants in the GPAC, community members who are participants in the GPAC, residents who went to the workshops, every single one of you worked so hard to create a really good document. I would really hate for that to go to waste because we continued to just not push forward in creating these changes that have honestly, the state has been requiring it since 2017. So we're already, to be honest, almost 7 years behind the curve. So I'll bring it to the DRC. But.
So protocol is that we can ask questions of staff, and I know that there will be some, but perhaps it might be a good idea to open this up to public comment and circle back to staff comments. Is that acceptable? Okay, so we're going to start with in the room. Are there comments in the room? I believe I have a speaker slip here from Dennis Beebe, and I see a hand patiently up on Zoom that will come up next.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, committee members, for your service to the community. I am Dennis Beebe. It's spelled B-E-E-B-E, which is neither Spanish nor Danish, so I feel I'm quite qualified to comment on the design standards for the village and the Mission Design District. I provided a red line copy of the draft standard because I found a few nits, and I don't want to bore you with those, but I do have some observations for both the village area overlay and the Mission overlay. My comment was basically about the roof design and the roof materials, comparing the description of the standards from one district to the other district. It appears as if a person could come in and propose Spanish tiles in the village, based upon what I read in the standard. If that's not so, then I think we should adjust the standard to make sure we're not getting Spanish tiles being proposed. Let's see, the roof inclinations. I'm glad they got steeper for the village, and I think they got flatter for the Mission. I like it. But the roof inclination for the dormers in the village, you know, you got a steep roof, and a dormer has got to be less inclined than the basic roof. So, but the dormers as specified in the standard have the same inclination span as the basic roof. So I suggest that the dormers be specified in, I don't know, so many angles of less inclination than the basic roof. So, oh, did I say I wasn't Danish or Spanish? I have some engineering background. I saw no mention of the streetscape or sidewalks. Maybe it's elsewhere in the standards, but it was all about structures and the building and the facades and roofs. What about the sidewalks? When a person proposes a new development, shouldn't they be required to at least match the red brick that exists almost everywhere else in the city? And what about if the city has to destroy an old concrete sidewalk? The city, shouldn't they, is the city required to replace it and upgrade it with red brick? I don't know whether the standards apply to the city or just developers, but I'd like you to consider that. And let's see. The general plan at times has more detail than the standards, and it should be the opposite. One example that I've noted was that the general plan requires grates around the trees in the sidewalk area. Of course, we don't mention the sidewalks or the scape at all, so obviously the grates aren't mentioned. Let's see. No, that's it. I don't think dormers, yes, there is one more, sorry. Dormers and gables are not appropriate for the Mission Design District. They just aren't. The two buildings that are cited in the standards as our anchor design buildings are the Veterans Hall and the Mission. So I took a tour of both buildings the other night. Neither one of them has dormers. Dormers are very difficult when you've got a shallow roof to begin with. And I didn't see any gables. So I think you ought to drop dormers and gables as part of the Mission Design District. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Okay, anybody else in the room? It doesn't look like there's anybody else here, so we'll turn it back to Zoom. And I see a hand up from Susan Bott, patiently waiting. Susan, can you unmute yourself and we'll bring you on?
Will do. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. I'm Susan Bott, representing WeWatch. The following comments were put together by our Protect Our Valley Work Group and Save Our Stars Committee. WeWatch recommends that whenever design-related decisions must be made about proposed projects, that the DRC be included in the decision-making process. This includes zoning clearance level projects where additions to existing single-family or multifamily dwellings are involved. It's especially important within the two design districts. We consider the DRC to be a critical element when design decisions are being made and oppose any dilution of its responsibilities. We appreciate the inclusion of design standards for exterior lighting in both districts under Section F. We recommend the following based on our almost 25 years of experience with exterior lighting ordinances, including Solvang's ordinance, which now needs some updating since we worked with the city on it in 2006. First, we have no comments on items 1, 4, or 6. On item 2 is shielded fixtures, and we recommend adding, on hillsides and in certain other settings, full cut-off fixtures may be needed to protect neighbors from light pollution and may be required by the Design Review Committee and/or planning and building staff. Number 3, height. We recommend the maximum height of light fixtures in or within 100 feet of residential areas be no more than 15 feet and 20 feet in other locations. This applies to both lighting on structures and freestanding poles. We would eliminate the current number 5. A new number 5 is to prevent excessive brightness and protect wildlife. The Kelvin rating shall be a maximum of 3,000 K with 2,800 K recommended where available. If the city plans to continue allowing all-year use of low-lumen holiday string lights around trees or as an architectural feature outlining buildings, an exception for this lighting is needed. Please see A3 in the current exterior lighting ordinance. Regular string lighting, e.g. patio lighting, should be regulated under item 2 above. Finally, we ask that you discuss G, private residential open spaces, number 2 and number 3. Will 60 square feet of open space, even using common space to help meet this requirement, be a barrier to second-story housing on existing commercial buildings? Long-term, more of such housing will be needed to meet the state housing requirements. Thanks for your consideration of these issues.
Thank you, Susan. Are there any other speakers on Zoom? I don't see anybody else raising their hand. So at this point, we will close public comments and move on to the committee. So I think that, first of all, I want to say that we all recognize the need for objective standards and couldn't be more convinced of that. At the same time, I appreciate Susan's comments on behalf of WeWatch that the Design Review Committee's engagement in the process is important. And I will open it up to committee comments at this point. Is there anybody who'd like to start?
I think it would be really good what we call the pre-application review and give the applicant, already what to expect from them, architecture, color, lighting, and that would avoid, that would reject them, and they would know how to go in the right direction.
So I think what you're saying is what's been practiced at times and encouraging the pre-application.
Pre-meeting,
Yeah.
oui, definitely. And give them a palette of color, even though a poster, a board, even with the material for the roof, the window, for everything, the lighting, both the village and the mission area, because they would have material to work with. And then they would go in the right direction. That would help this final decision. So I don't know who would do the palette of color and.
I think that's on our
Okay.
task list in the future to advise the city, if I understand correctly on that, to develop palettes of colors. And I believe that's what you were referencing, Raphael.
Yeah, so the future would be, if this gets approved by the council, we would be coming back to you on various, essentially, kind of similar to what we're doing here, but a much more elongated, because now we'd be discussing how the formatting, essentially we're creating a book that will then be used by property owners and developers. I believe you're referring to the pre-application process. That actually is included in here because right now it's not codified. We have a fee for it. We don't have a process for it. I can laugh because I can't. But we don't have a process for it. This would actually create the process. And so that's why in the draft language, it says it would inform the applicant of design standards, et cetera. It would provide possible development alternatives or modifications. But the biggest one is it allows for a presentation to review authority to receive feedback on conceptual project design. And so essentially what that would be is it would be a staff report. You would basically get a list of where it meets, what it doesn't meet, and then you actually would get a copy of the letter we provided the applicant. And then from there, you're able to then have a lot of free reign on your comments, whereas in an entitlement application, this is a different story. I did hear the comments from WeWatch in regards to changing zoning clearance to the DRC. Unfortunately, I 100% disagree with the comment, and I do that because, one, we have no objective standards for residential outside of the proposed design review districts, and the state has made it very clear that unless they are objective, we cannot go there. And so that's just another step that it's already outlined, as a matter of fact, in the article in chapter 1 chapter 2 of the municipal code, that you don't hear single family residential. The change is multifamily would be the same way. But again, if we're doing a pre-application, it's a different story. Those rules don't apply. You're able to have a little bit of say, and that's why, in particular, the text states if you're doing 5 or more, it's highly recommended the planning manager refer that to that, and then this board will actually get a taste of that next month of how it should work. So that I think that's what you're looking for in terms of the pre-application review process.
So I'd like to circle around to your comments in regards to WeWatch there, and I do understand the residential, but then we have our design overlay zones. So right now, any general plan amendments, I would like to ask that the zoning, any general plan amendments that include design standards, et cetera, would also come in the same way that the zoning code amendments do to us, because we've been so engaged, at least some of us, representing the committee in creating that general plan.
So again, general plan policies. There are no standards. I just want to be very clear. There are no standards in the general plan. It is simply policy.
Understood.
So
But policy is the precursor to the code.
And that is a council level decision. And that's going in a place where I do not feel that's outside this realm, which is why it says then there are standards for zoning, because that's a different story. You're dealing with standards. Policy is a much larger question. And then the question then becomes, is it if it's connected to a project? That's the other thing too. Now, if it's connected to a project and a project applicant is proposing a general plan amendment based on a project, that's a different story. Then would that come to the DRC? Yes, it would. But if you're talking a pure general plan amendment of policy,
I'm talking about a general plan amendment that would include design standards.
and again, if it's connected to a project and it requires a development permit, then it would go to you anyways.
So a clarifying question, though. I think I'm going to ask the same question differently. Since the DRC had representation on the general plan committee and was party to the policy review and that implementation, what is the concern with the body being recommend in terms of viewing any policy change to that document? I'm not following why there's a disconnect when we were party to that process.
You can make I have historically and just practice, I've never had an architecture review board or design review committee or board have that sort of leeway when it's a simple general plan amendment. So a case in point, if I'm doing a general plan amendment that has to do with a land use designation flip, I have to come to the DRC for that?
No, but
No.
Esther clarified that
I may.
relative to the design standards section or the design element
Yes.
section.
And I think what might help is just clarifying that the DRC's duties and responsibilities are spelled out in the city's code. So within that section, that's the responsibilities of the DRC. So I think what Raphael is saying is there's a lot of the general plan doesn't fall within those listed responsibilities. So to the extent they fall outside of those responsibilities, we don't currently have the framework for that to go to the DRC in the city's code. Is that clarified? Wait.
Not really.
Okay, yeah, and it might help if you saw the code section I'm looking at, but we're talking about the duties and responsibilities that the DRC has responsibility for, include developing aesthetic standards and requirements,
Right.
reviewing colors, etc. So
Correct.
within those listed responsibilities, the general plan expands beyond those responsibilities in a lot of ways because
Right.
there are
Many
certain
elements, right.
colors. Yeah. So, but to the extent there are elements or parts of the general plan that intersect with these responsibilities, then that could be within the purview of the DRC.
And that is exactly what we're asking, so that it would be stated similarly to the zoning code amendments that include design standards, and this goes on to say building form, et cetera, and it says may be brought. I would actually like that to be should or shall be brought.
But I think we are trying to limit it to the same responsibility set.
Yes.
Which is the design element itself, because the village area is critical to be managed by a design review committee. That's the only reason this body truly exists. If we didn't have such a unique brand, I don't know what we'd be doing every month.
Yeah. And now it's expanded to be 2 overlay zones with the 2 different designs, so that it's a little bit broadened. But of course, historically, our focus has always been on the village. So
We
that
can
is,
take a look at it based on, again, what it says in your duties in 244. But again, a general plan is a much larger document, and it
Understood.
as with Taylor, as in the city attorney, that if it doesn't fall within your reach, then
we understand.
so again,
But when it does.
And again, we're talking a pure general plan amendment here,
Right.
not if it's
Yes.
connected to a project, different story. And again, we're talking about applications here.
We understand.
Yeah.
If it
Community
helps to give
design.
a scenario. So, okay, so there's a policy change within the design element of the general plan, and somebody decides that they want to introduce, I don't know, something that would be contrary to what's there today. Okay.
Yeah,
just whatever. it
not
is.
Danish.
Not
Yeah.
Danish. Everybody else could make that decision and not the design review.
So I think we're
committee.
missing the
right?
key
Okay.
point here.
Okay.
And this is why I'm going, so.
No, I
let's-
want to
let's-
understand.
The general
Right.
plan, so let's take that for instance,
Okay.
general plan. So right now in our general plan, and obviously it's not in what you're seeing today, but I know I've written it as such. Right now, there are absolutely zero procedures on when a general plan amendment can be required and who process it. Under the new code, there's only one. It's an application, and it's either a direction from the city council to city staff. So the city council agendizes something and they have to direct staff to go amend the general plan. Or it's an application, then city staff takes in and takes it to the city council. And the city council will then say, no, we're not doing that. Or yes, city staff, proceed with the general plan amendment.
If that's true, though, then why is planning commission shown as recommend?
Right.
Because that's the general process of a general plan amendment. Once someone has applied for the application of a general plan amendment, that's the process that it goes through.
I'd still like to ask that if the amendment includes design standards, that it comes in front of this body. That is.
And again, there are no
what we were
standards
tasked
in the general plan. That's
No,
not,
the policy.
The
What I
policy.
think we should do
Of the
is
design amendment.
perhaps just take a closer look at 244 and see if the responsibilities of this body would allow for that to happen. We haven't taken that close of a look yet, so I think we can review that and consider it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then when you're doing that, I would like to see that general plan amendment with the note 1 for the DRC role says zoning code amendments that include design standards, building form, et cetera, may be brought. I think it should say should be brought, shall be brought to the DRC for review. I think anything that is going to affect these design standards needs to come before this body. And we understand that we are an advisory body, but that is our task here. And kind of continuing on that, on page 29, where we see zoning clearances, color and material boards that are changes that are consistent with the original approval. I'm trying to understand, I feel a bit mixed about that one, but as we go on to the very bottom item, proposed building repaintings within the 2 design districts that adhere to color palette schemes and on the adopted design handbook, that should still come to this committee for review, because again, the project can put together all these elements and still not be a cohesive whole that fits within the environment that is situated. And that is our task up here, to bring that. So that's kind of taking this committee out of that equation, and I feel like it's very important that we remain there. And so back to the color and material board, and I'm going to stop on that one because I'd like to see, do my colleagues have other opinions in regards to that last item?
Well, I got snagged on that a little bit also, partly because, again.
On?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I got snagged on that, along with some of the other zoning clearance items, but on the one that you're talking about, the color.
Color and
the,
material
color and
board?
material change that are consistent. Again, I came to think of, isn't consistency a subjective determination?
That exception's already there. It's already codified. It's just taking the exception that's already there in our code today and putting it under a zoning clearance.
And when it says consistent with the original approval,
It's also already it's already codified as well. Those are already codified.
But you're in that situation, though, the planning manager has to make a determination of whether they are consistent or not.
Well, if they're repainting the building the same color, then
Yeah, that's not what it says, though. It says consistent, not identical.
with the original
And I
approval.
just think at some
Yeah.
point then, what does that mean? Particularly when, in a situation like this and all of the other 13 items that are here, I'd ask council to see if she has any concerns that would be an administrative action.
Well, a lot of these.
Apparently,
a lot
for
of
which
these already,
there is, excuse me, for which there is no appeal under the, according to the review authority list. That is, that set of actions on zoning clearance reside and end with the planning manager, not not appealable even to the city council.
Yeah, a lot of these already are that way. An ADU can't appeal that. Do single-family residents can't appeal that. Reparking and restriping for the 88 can't appeal that. It's all building.
Okay, I
code.
mean, I'm asking the council if she's agrees that it's okay that all of those zoning clearance actions that are listed there are appropriately exempt from any review by planning commission or particularly the city council.
So I would have to take a closer look and to see what exactly is in the city's current code, because as Raphael's mentioned, these provisions are kind of all over the place in the city's code currently. He is correct that a lot of these ministerial actions are not necessarily subject to review because they are ministerial. I have seen other cities technically have any kind of directorial action be reviewable, but it does become murky when we get into, say, an SB9 territory when state law mandates that is ministerial so long as it complies with the objective standards. And so the only real appeal would be whether or not you agree that it applies with the objective standards, but that shouldn't be a question because it is just a yes or no. Does it comply with objective standard X? Yes, no. So I'd have to take a closer look at all of the items, and we are still kind of waiting to review the zoning ordinance altogether as a whole. But that's what I would say.
What if you lived next door to a multi-dwelling unit, and the planning manager has approved certain additions to those dwelling units, and this says that that's a city action, public action that for which there's no review after the planning manager makes a decision.
And sorry, I'm not apprised of how we're defining addition here. Raphael, could you expand on that?
I'm just, what I'm looking at is under the zoning clearance.
Yeah.
That one happens to be additions to existing multi-unit dwellings.
So in addition to a multi-unit dwelling could be pretty much a balcony. That's an addition.
Well,
A
also.
laundry room, that's an addition.
Or
Or
expansive-
an addition of dwelling units in a multi-unit.
5 units or,
So that's the clarity because it says addition. Addition and new units are two different stories. An addition is literally an addition of square footage. A new unit is defined as a development permit, and that's required.
But you understand that my confusion, not knowing the intricacies of that,
yeah,
the
agreed.
jargon, it says additions to existing
Yeah,
multi-unit dwellings. I thought you have a dwelling unit, multi-unit with 6 units and you add 6 more.
No, an addition literally is an
Okay,
addition
I'm just
to
saying, I
existing
thought when you said
residential
addition, you meant
space.
addition.
No, there's a huge difference from a building standpoint. An addition
Okay.
is just that, an addition.
Well-
So again, you want to
just
go,
looking
you
at
want to
this-
go down this path. So you want to do an addition of
No, I'm just
800
thinking
square feet. Yeah,
that
hold on, I wanna finish here.
everybody who's, there are people that are going to be adversely affected by that, and they should have
But,
what we call due process and an opportunity to appeal the decision of the administrative agency.
But as council had mentioned, some things at this point are out of everyone's hands. A great example will be an ADU.
So
That is-
actually, I guess maybe the answer, and I'll look to council with this, the answer is a person who's aggrieved by those decisions that are not subject to review by the city council will have authority to go to the district court and sue.
You always have it.
Depends on the situation. Whether they can successfully bring that claim is another
Success
story.
is not, are they entitled to do that? I mean, the success is based on the merits of the claim.
Well, Perhaps part of this could be solved by defining in your list of definitions, the word additions is in there. I don't know if that's because
It's already defined.
Okay, there,
And
that's
again,
good.
an addition, a new unit is very clear. If you're doing two, so there's a difference between, two-unit dwelling duplex, that's an SB9. Again, that's a state law. It's very specific. If you're doing an SB9 application, it's a separate application. That is our clear, concise cut. Yes, that's not gonna, that's a by right ministerial. But if you're not doing an SB9, and say you are, a great example is I have an existing single-family home. It's zoned future R2, but I want to add, 3 units to it. None of them are ADUs. That's a development permit. Therefore, that needs to then go to its proper channels, which is ultimately the Planning Commission.
And the, this 500 square feet, which seems like the magic number on some of these, to add that to, line 1 or 2 isn't something that we can really do because of state law. On housing, am I understanding that correctly as well?
Correctly, yes.
Okay.
Again, additions it's a building permit.
Yeah.
It's either you meet the setbacks, you meet the heights, off you go.
Kind of straightforward.
It's extremely straightforward. 500 on the additions for commercial, it's a different story. Right now, our current code says 300. That's been increased to 500 because, again, that 500 is the biggest key, as I've stated before, because at 500, you now have additional building code requirements you have to meet. At 500, you now have to pay school fees. At 500, there's a lot more
Understood.
to it. So that's
Yeah.
why it's increased to that effect.
Are you comfortable moving on from that?
Sure, I mean, I've had
Yeah.
my say, and the planning manager's had his, and I guess our attorney's had hers. So I don't have anything more to add on it.
Can I go back to the other one, the color and material
Yes,
board
please.
changes?
Yeah.
So would it be correct then to suggest that, or okay to suggest, that what our attorney said was relative to the color and material board, as long as they are consistent with the objective design standards? So could that statement be changed in that color and material board changes that are consistent with the original approval and compliant with the objective design standards and/or design handbook, are then for so they have to meet 2 standards for you to just approve it?
I would have to mull that over with the city attorney, simply because if we're talking an existing, land use permit that's been done or conditional use permit,
I'm just thinking 2 wrongs don't make a right. So if something did get approved because of, whatever board or whoever approved it, when, and it still is, it's not consistent with today's design objectives, you don't want to just re-up for another 11 years.
unfortunately, there are vested property rights that we have to deal with. And
I know,
particularly
I'm asking the question because I'm
Yes.
trying to
I'll let the attorney
I'm
answer that one.
trying to improve the aesthetics. I'm not trying to make it difficult. I'm trying to improve.
That's an understandable concern. I hear you on that. Again, it will depend on the type of entitlement and the type of rights that are associated with that entitlement. But once we have once we're able to take a full look at the zoning code, I'll keep that in mind when reviewing as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. So then let's go back to the last item, this proposed building repainting within the district. I would like that removed from the zoning clearance list. Any comments from anybody else here? Because that, even as I said earlier, it can adhere to a color palette and meet objective standards on other items and still not fit necessarily within the environment in which it sits or come together as a cohesive whole. And that, I think, is our job here to look at those projects. Which was an example today for Ingeborg's chocolate, because that was basically kind of a repaint with, the yellow had faded, and so that type of thing would no longer come in front of us in that case. So, committee, any
Right,
comments?
if it was in the palette already, if it was in the palette, which again, we're not approving, we're
Right.
coming to y'all.
Right.
And it would be a series of meetings
And that pallette's never going to be the answer for everything in every case.
Right.
I think it's just that answers that question, like, what do you
So,
want?
Okay, as we're getting to nuance here, the nuance of this is a variation or a palette of colors, okay? It's not one color. It's the combination of the colors in the project. That's what she's actually getting at. So it would then be left to you to decide if the blue, the green, the red, the brown, the black, all those colors will look good together in their uniform.
Configuration.
In their configuration. That might be a challenge for you.
again, the vision is to have you do the base paint color, the facade, the primary facade color. And then from there, a array of trim colors that match that facade and a door color. And there's plenty of ways to slice it.
Well, and a hinge and a shutter and, that's,
Right.
that's
And-
the
and-
rub.
And again, this is, I'm presenting this based on the council goals, which is to streamline.
Yeah.
And two is to provide, again, that ability that when someone comes to the counter, we're able to give them the max guidance possible.
I concur with the guidance and still advise that it come in front of this body for approval, and maybe it's on the consent agenda that it comes, and then it can be pulled or not. But to leave it up to staff when there are so many variables that are possible, and add into it that it sits within an environment that you have to consider the color of the building to the left and the right and across the street and all as well. So, but I'm not sure what my peers here think, so
Oh,
that
I'm
is-
going to chime in. You're ready.
please.
So I appreciate with the other committee members, I strongly, agree with what you have said. It's probably better for the staff to punt back to us, don't you think? And on a lot of these cases where there is a palette or a situation, I'm specifically referencing under Review Authority 1114 variances. I would like to see that put back under the DRC purview. Zoning clearances, I let go. Interpretations, I think that should come back under the DRC and what.
My question was, what does interpretations mean? I
Our
hadn't
goal is
gotten
to
that.
make the city the most beautiful place we can make it. That's what we're here for. And to serve your goal is to getting to that goal as fast as possible, since solving is getting long in the tooth. So we understand those two goals, and I would strongly prefer to see interpretations, variances. I'll leave it there for coming back to the DRC.
And variances due on item 2 there, note 2. But what does interpretations, what does that mean? I do need a definition of that.
Interpretation is in the code. If right now a good one is our landscaping for parking. It's what is sufficient amount of landscaping for a parking finger. That's what it says. So that's literally an interpretation. A example would be building height. Building height interpretation right now, it's based on finished floor level. What's finished floor level? Is that something that we really, obviously building height is being revised, so that's a whole different ballgame, because now it's going to be revised to be something completely clear, which is we're no longer doing finished floor level, because that is counter to our general plan policies, which dictate that we should have hillside preservation and hillside views. So the easiest way to change that is don't do finished floor level for building height, and do
Max height.
it's finished floor level. Finished floor level means basically I can grade out a lot
That's right.
on a hillside, and that's my finished floor, and then measure. Whereas if I were to take a measurement called average natural grade, which is that's the existing contours, middle point, and from that middle point, then I'm able to extrapolate up. That's an interpretation of what that middle point is. So does that start to make sense? And then a
Is it
variant.
spelled out for us someplace?
Yeah, it's actually it's kind of not spelled out now, but it will be spelled out with this code change of what actually is interpretation, because our code literally doesn't have an interpretation section.
But shouldn't that be a DRC thing as it's going through the process?
So
When it includes design
so-
decisions.
now we'll flip to the DRC's objective, which is the village core. Modifications for standards, that's you. That is the variance, essentially, is a modification. Yes, absolutely, that goes to you. Because again, it's based on, it's getting out of this mentality. It's based on permit application type. So if it's a development permit, that comes to you. That is, if they're asking for a modification for standards of that specifically, then that comes to you. But if we're talking strictly an interpretation of the code itself, that typically always falls to the director.
Right.
It never goes out to another board. And then to appeal that goes to the actual technical board, which would be the planning commission.
Yeah.
Variance is the same way. Variance, it's a a good example of variance is, I want to build a shed. I built a shed illegally in my backyard. It's over 120 square feet. I didn't realize that I needed a building permit for the shed. So, you know what? I need to seek a variance because I built that shed 5 feet from my property line. Well, the minimum rear setback is 10 feet. So I'm going to apply for a variance. It's a very cut and dry thing. And then on top of that, there's 4 findings that
My neighbors
aren't even Solvang findings. They're state of California findings. So automatically, I would say, well, that defeats 2 of the 3 tests. So therefore, we're going to recommend denial of that variance because you haven't really given anything to us. The variance is not simply just a design standard gets thrown away. Again, in this code, our code right now does not have those things such as interpretations, does not, is not clear on the variance. This gives it clarity of who that body is. And specifically for the design districts, a variance they wouldn't take a variance for a standard, like a half timber. That's a modification to standard. That's a different story. This board sees that and will have to provide that recommendation.
But shouldn't it still say?
To clarify, so a variance, what we're looking at is an unusual hardship or something unusual about the property that necessitates a deviation from the zoning regulation. Whereas a modification, like Raphael was saying, to a half timber, it's unlikely that a property would have such unusual circumstances that they wouldn't be able to meet a half timber requirement versus as opposed to, say, a setback or some other requirement.
And then to add to that, a lot of the stuff that's in zoning clearance is already codified in your land use permit that's already exempt, that we're already looking at. So, I understand the want to pull back in, but some of this stuff is already codified. Some of this stuff has left the train 7 years ago, and here we are. So hopefully that clears stuff up.
Do you have an opinion, or does the attorney have an opinion on how to keep solving?
My opinion is this is your first step, but I think a lot of it has to be is a mental note, is that a lot of our local control has been eroded, period. There's nothing I can do, there's nothing you can do, there's nothing your neighbor can do. That's been eroded from Sacramento. And that train started back in 2015. So every time there's a big project on the horizon and they use some sort of state lever as a part of their application, our local controller already automatically is eroded. So we have to look at it as, well, how do we keep solving? We start with the objective standards for the village. And yeah, they're not perfect. I'm 100% with you. And if you want to recommend, the colors come back to you, then so be it. We put it in the staff report that the DRC is recommending this, and ultimately it becomes a planning commission, recommendation, and then the council becomes the ultimate decider of what they really want to do with that.
Yes.
But the honest truth is, if you want some of that local control back, you got to start somewhere in terms of what we have the ability to regulate. Unfortunately, we don't have that ability to regulate where a single-family home goes anymore.
No.
We don't have the
Understood.
ability for an ADU. We don't have ability for additions, but we do have an ability of how that single-family home is going to look. How is that design going to be consistent with the neighborhood based on something that we've objectified? And unfortunately, we're not there yet for all the rest of the residential areas of the city, but this is the start for our core, which is our village and the mission itself. So, I know a comment was the two buildings are the staple of the general plan. He's correct. The mission itself and the Veterans Hall are staples of that. But should every single building emulate that? Because the Mission Design District not only takes in the public facilities and some TRC zones, but it also takes in some multifamily zones, some office zones. It's a multitude of zones. And so some of those uses should potentially have that ability to do dormers and gables, et cetera, because that is actually a part. They're architectural definitions. Those are a part of those design standards. They're a part of those architectural types. So you should be able to give the applicant a little bit more ability to hide some of the other things to make an office in that zone, but to the mission design standard.
But I feel that we should have a say in those decisions.
And that kind of is why we're so, we haven't gotten it really into the rest of this document, because these are core issues. So as I understand it, the general plan amendment with the zoning, with the note that it's applied to the zoning code, is something that's being reviewed. We're asking that the may be changed to should. I don't understand the interpretations, but it sounds as though there's not, or is there room to add in the design review committee review on that? We'd like to have you look at that. And then circling back to page 29, going with the color and material boards that are consistent with original approval is
compliant.
as long as we can add in the and compliant with the design guidelines. I think that's comfortable, or that kind of part 2, and however that will be worded. The final proposed building repaintings, that should be removed. We all applaud the allow for presentation to a review authority for feedback. I think all of that is in agreement. There are a series of small typos that some of us have noted and we'll share with you that we don't need to bring up at this time. That the next item that I would like to have addressed is on page 33. It is item 2B, and it's half timbering. And the requirement that the beams shall consist of wood or synthetic composite wood-like materials. This is not real practical in our environment, which is why so many of our buildings now have that stucco. Yeah, right, to have it look like faux beams. So I do feel as though that's not a realistic expectation, nor will it maintain well over time. So that needs to be broadened or included there.
So I would suggest being very specific in terms of the way you want to broaden that, whether it's concrete. Again, these are minimum standards, minimum.
Understood.
And they're coming back, as a part of a development permit. So, synthetic material like Trex, et cetera, that those do hold up to time.
But they're just stuck on the side, and the way that they're made now is that because the building shifts and moves, the faux is literally kind of a extension of the finish, whether it be stucco or concrete or whatever. I think those should be options to utilize what's currently been used effectively and contemporarily. Because if you look at the buildings that are built with more like something stuck on them, over time, it does not look good. And real wood does not work within our environment. I actually discourage that because of our expansion and contraction. My experience with that has been really the opposite of a positive thing.
Negative.
Yeah.
Are you in
Exactly.
are you in section 1A? Are you somewhere else?
I'm on page 33,
Yeah.
which is 1119-4, item 2B, page 33. B,
Okay, so the wood is mentioned above. Under A Romanet 1, at the top of the page.
correct. Which also needs
That's
to,
where I looked at that and said, this should be moved down to architectural materials section, because for me, what you were saying, I agree with, but I felt like you have wood as a detail, not as a structure. So I just said, take that and move it down, and then, because it should be a portion of a detail, not a full facade. That speaks to what we've been talking about recently, about wood facade.
agreed.
And I didn't know, but I had materials for the buildings in the village area as also, in lieu of stucco, plaster would be an option. Shouldn't be limited, and
Right.
brick. So brick it's old-fashioned, but it is still a material that is
For your
in
faux
the-
beams?
in the vernacular. Well, for the actual structure.
Oh,
You can
I
build a-
understand.
Yeah, you can
Yeah.
build a brick building.
No, I don't, well,
Well, a brick, you can't do brick and mortar, but you know,
yeah,
yeah.
right, because of earthquake,
I mean,
yes.
I'm assuming this section is for facade, meaning visible facade.
Yes,
Non-structure.
Yeah, right? Like, we're not talking about structure.
right. We're talking about how to achieve
Correct,
the
'cause you
the
can build
Danish
timber,
look.
steel,
Yeah,
or whatever. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the physical look of it.
so we need some tweaking there, for sure.
I do have.
Can we have specificity on the tweak?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I don't want to spend an hour going through all of my comments, and
Right.
I just wonder, and I'm apologizing, I was in Sydney when this was due, and I really did try to get to it, and I couldn't get to it. But I do have comments, and I echo what Dennis Beebe said when he was up at the podium. Some of the exact things he said are my comments. And so I don't know how you want to go about it, or how you want to go about it, Raphael, but it might be helpful, since you did at least invite us for additional edits, to take the edits and to synthesize them one more time.
And we understand that time is of the essence, and we want to help expedite that. And I echo your comments and Dennis's, thank you, Dennis, because the next thing I look at is when I see building mass and height on page 34.
Yeah.
Architectural appendages shall not exceed more than 10 feet beyond the maximum height, and these appendages can include gables, pitched roofs, dormers. I think that it does not match with what I consider a architectural appendage that we want to allow extra height for a gable or a pitched roof or a dormer. So that, I think of it more as a spire or a wind vane or something of that, yeah, clock tower or something.
Those already allow to exceed the height to 50 feet. And
Right.
that's just been carried over from the code. It's
So what would you, because certainly a gable or a pitched roof or a dormer should not be
See the
the
height of the
35
roof.
height, yeah, and it shouldn't be above the roof.
Right.
What would you, I mean, I would say maybe then a chimney, is what came to my mind, but what would you have in mind, or did you have something specific, Raphael?
no, this is the point of the DRC is to make, again, make it your own. And again, these help city staff to sort of determine, when we do review an application and we're looking at the height, if a roof line precedes that, then, particularly does that work? So again, great example is the pitch itself. So if the pitch carries a window with it, then could that exceed the height? Yes, you can always add that in, but it's just.
So I think one of the limitations of this body obviously is we're not going to think of every potential architectural detail that we probably should. I thought at one point it was mentioned that there was going to be a consultant who was going to offer some objective design standards for us to at least review. Is that off the table?
It's still very on the table. But again, knowing by the time we put out for an RFP, it's already at the budget, and then by the time we start the process, we will blow past our 180 days.
Okay.
Yeah, understood. So
So-
this is a fill-in measure.
Very much a fill-in measure. so-
Understood. Yeah, but what our concerns are is in the interim that, and of course, this will help the, anybody who comes
Right.
from
So I
outside
mean,
to
in
do
theory,
this.
if we want to just see chimneys for the time being, then we could just mix everything else out, and then that
May
way
include a
it-
chimney and leave it at that.
and you leave it at that. And then
Well,
again,
that's the only thing I can think of that
I couldn't think of anything else either that isn't already addressed.
right.
elsewhere.
Or a wind vane, is that
And again,
somewhere else?
And so that would be ornamental features that can exceed the height, which, based on other projects that have come
Right.
forward, we kind of try to make it pretty clear what we want to see. So if we want to
Right.
see a spire, a cloud-type bell tower, or other thing, then that now would be the time to add that in. I know what we don't
Windmill.
want to see.
Windmill.
Yeah, see, that's in there now.
Right, right.
But with that being said, again, the vision is this is a stopgap. Again, I'm
Right,
as
but
much as
Understood.
as much as it's
Yeah.
been sparring today. Ultimately, at the end, I recognize that in order to be 100% fleshed out, this is going to be a much more longer process. But knowing that this community is very strong voiced about maintaining our look and feel, I think action, at least putting something to paper now, is better than no action whatsoever.
Agreed with that. So a question on that then, shall not exceed more than 10 feet beyond the maximum height. Are we talking about 35 feet there in that maximum height?
Yes, correct. So
And
that's-
yet there's a 50-foot thing for other exceptions.
yeah, and again,
45.
it's
No, there's a 50-foot.
it's
No,
50
I know,
foot.
but
But here it's
it's
45.
So
Right,
it's 35, 45, 50.
right. Why?
Well, my big question was must protect view corridors, but this doesn't feel like we are.
Yeah,
No.
it's you can set it down. That's the other thing too. So if we just want to say nope, we're gonna do the 35 and that's it, and then the roof pitches are what they are, then that's fine by me. We don't have to have these exceptions.
I mean, the taller we make things and steeper, we start to lose it. We did.
Yep, agreed.
We-
And that's why having gables, pitched roof dormers. So given that we're trying to expedite this,
Yeah.
my suggestion is take it out completely. And then if somebody wants to come in front of the body and ask for an exception for their fabulous wind vane or their chimney, then they can come to us.
And that's fine. I mean, we can always, and I'm
And then we address it later when we get into more
very
detail.
much address it then, and that'll.
Can we do that?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just take out 3A, item 2. The roofing materials do need some further fleshing out per Dennis's comments. We can go into detail, but I think that we don't need to based upon the comments that have been received from the public and up here. The one thing I did want to mention is metal, and perhaps others have something else. The metal seems like is shiny okay. There's not a lot of, it just says that it has to include standing seams. And I recognize that metal is an option that is going to be more commonly used.
So our current guidelines call for a patina as the only color that's possible. We most certainly can, again, that's a good regulatory one where you can say it's matte finish. So that way, again, again, keeping it clear.
Yes.
And then if you want to introduce a particular hue, like keeping the patina and adding additional color hues, that would be fine.
That would be my suggestion on that, so that it has that old world look, that we don't end up with a shiny metal roof
We know shiny.
somewhere. Okay?
So
Can I back up though?
Yeah,
It's quick-
please.
It's a quick question, clarification. Relative what you were just talking about, Rafael, about the maximum height not be measured by the finished floor area. Why do we reference finished floor area then in 3A4?
So there is very much a difference here. So this standard's been written to take into consideration potential reuse and new construction and mixed uses, particularly residential on second and third stories. So the reality is that 35 feet, it's virtually impossible to get a third story in.
Correct.
Particularly residential, whereas if you measure it
Yes.
for finished floor and then you measure it based on habitable space, that's 35. You can get that third floor in. You can get the larger first floor in, which gives a lot more flexibility for the future. And then it hits the housing element goal for less, and then
Okay.
and then here's the key, just
Okay.
Yeah.
those pitches then
Yeah.
can technically go over it. So if we're eliminating the ability to go
Yeah.
over those pitches, then
Yeah, then your third floor is
Yeah.
going to be within the roof line. in part.
correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then
Understood.
That's actually old world.
that
Yeah,
helps us out
that
a
is
lot.
old world. Yeah.
So
Because
Yeah.
otherwise,
I know,
we're
you're-
kind of blowing right past the
That's
35-foot
right.
limit, and that's what really concerned me. And, Jennifer and I have had a lot of conversation through the general plan on that matter. Yeah.
So, and again, this is only specific to the
Yeah,
village.
yeah.
Understood.
So,
Yeah.
because there's not much height differential in the
Understood.
village, whereas everywhere else, now we're going to
Yeah.
flip to the average grade, which totally now makes sense because again, we got a lot more hillsides, and this is
Yeah.
where I know
Sure.
I don't want to get back to I do want to get back. We did recommend modifying our lighting standards, and while I agree with a lot of those modifications, I think lighting and then so a couple things that were left out. Lighting is one, landscaping was another, fencing is a
Yes.
third. All that has not been changed because those, I feel from a manager and practitioner position, those need a lot more vetting from particularly this body to take additional steps then to recommend to the planning commission and then ultimately recommend to city council. So that's why those have all been left out.
Right, understood.
And the work plan that's in my head will be take those items next year along with a series of code updates that I'm sure I'm going to have to get done thanks to the city of California at the end of this legislative session.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you didn't need our commentary on mission yet, is what you're saying, because you're focusing on village.
no, I think
both,
so.
Both works,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
Both works, yeah.
Can we, just a couple of little things, but I do want to make sure that our committee agrees. On page 35, trim, use of trim shall consist of wood. I put painted wood. Is that the place to put that? Because it sounds like it could be a natural wood finish.
Yeah. I don't,
Does that, yeah, I'm
I
not sure.
don't think it, well,
I don't know what the interpretation would be there.
I don't think we care.
Well,
Okay.
from the director's.
I don't think you care whether it's stained wood, painted wood, or.
Okay.
Yeah, because
Okay.
it basically says it needs to complement
Yeah,
from the
it's
selected
right.
building color.
Complement and
So,
contrast. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Unless you want everything painted,
No.
right? That's
Yeah,
so-
okay, yeah, thank you. Lighting, I would like to have the comments that Susan brought forth for the design the lighting for the village area be incorporated in for I guess for both design districts. Yes. But let's one more comment on lighting. String lights do need to be addressed. At some point, we need to address string lights. Can we pick up the verbiage as per their suggestion? I haven't looked at that. So I think that the things Solvang is noted for are string lights that are white, little white lights everywhere. Raphael, what do you think? Can we pick up some of the verbiage to add in string lights, or are we just skipping that for this, at this point?
I have an opinion, obviously.
We are so surprised. Please share. We don't have any opinions up here.
We're all opinionated people, so I think
Yeah.
that's why we all get along, even though that sometimes feel like we don't. When it comes to string lights, and particularly in our village, a lot of businesses use them to create an ambiance. And while I appreciate the comments, I stick to the old adage of time, place, manner. If we're going to regulate string lights in the village, that opens up a lot of, from an enforcement standpoint, a lot of can of worms, particularly that it's not been vetted against with the chamber, none of our businesses, et cetera. And again, I look at string lights as an ambiance. It could also be used from a traffic, or not traffic safe, but just a lighting safety standpoint. Now, if we're talking string lights in a residential hillside zone, yeah, I'm 100% with you.
No, we're only addressing the
right,
design.
as in, is there, is there a way we can reduce the glare, et cetera, on those things? Yeah, absolutely. But I just feel that
That's not even actually what I meant. I just felt as though to completely ignore them.
oh, do you want to ignore? Yeah, I would recommend we ignore.
Well, I would actually, that was my concern, was ignoring them. So at some point, I think we need to address it.
Approve them.
Yeah, I would like to see them approved in
that's-
some manner so that when a project comes forward and has a lighting plan, that also is presented with the string light
And
lighting
that's,
plan.
and again, string lights don't require a building permit. So those can always be added at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes for enforcement. I look at it also from an enforcement lens. It
Yeah,
makes it
understood.
Really tough.
Yeah. And consistency in application and, I don't know, does our attorney have any thoughts on that? Since you're here this evening?
I'm sorry, you're asking my thoughts on whether string lighting can be regulated?
Effectively, without creating a burden for enforcement?
I would probably defer to kind of Raphael's expertise. I think that's getting into his territory there. But I mean, if you have the code enforcement staffing and the time and the resources, it can be done. But again, that's kind of dipping into policy.
And that isn't really our goal to sick people on it, but rather just to have it be part of it. Okay, so I think.
I don't have the staff and I don't have the resources.
Okay.
And I'm going to just put it out there that you will get a lot of angry business owners.
At some point, we need to address this. Tonight is not the
We'll
time.
punt. We'll punt.
So,
We'll punt on
please go on to,
36, page 36G and 41G, is that a duplicate? In terms of landscaping and open spaces?
Yes, they are. And actually, I want to address. We watched it make a example, and they actually made a really good comment in regards to the private open space.
yes.
The private open space actually isn't a reduction of what is currently required. I looked into this. We require 200 square feet of personal open space for multifamily. That's impossible. So this is a massive reduction. 60 square feet actually can very easily be done. It's a good example. Essentially, it's I'm trying to do my math here. It's a 9 feet in length by 8 feet balcony or deck. And so
6 by 10 or, yeah.
that's essentially what that is.
Yeah.
So it's 60 square feet. You can even bring it down to 50 or 40. I don't recommend it.
No, yeah.
But from a designer practitioner standpoint, 8 feet is really the minimum what we're looking for. To get the extra foot, you're going to be good to go. And then conversions is, again, if you're converting space, this talks about new construction. If we're converting space, it's a different story.
Okay,
Although
that's-
it did bring a different, that we watched did bring a very good point that I will have to go back to the lab and think about how to deal with conversions.
Well, because I think that was the thing, especially when we look at, again, from the general plan perspective of encouraging mixed use within the village area in particular, where the upstairs becomes residential. How does this open space requirement impact that?
Right.
Where it's literally impossible to achieve.
And to their credit, I hadn't even thought about it until
Yeah.
tonight. So as to are they repeats? They are. They are very much repeats. If you want to make a differential between the two, I would recommend the mission actually be pumped up a little bit more, simply because you have a lot more
I agree.
zones. So we can most certainly do it that way. To Dennis, is Dennis still here?
Yeah.
There he is. To Dennis's point, in terms of including sidewalks, et cetera, these regulations are intended for private development. Sidewalks are the city realm, and we already have those standards of brick and concrete. And I know I've already talked to Roger about updating those standards. So as those standards are brought forth, obviously they need to be vetted consistent with the general plan policies that are put in place. So the general plan encompasses everything, but there are certain docs that implement that general plan, and so our engineering standards, since there are sidewalk, dictate brick, concrete, et cetera, hence why they're not here.
So I have one related comment to the open spaces comment, and that's that while we note here that, well, it starts in 32B, and then we say it again in 36G, but we note that open space requirements provide for a variety of functional, well-designed open spaces that mimic courtyard and gathering spaces of Europe that enhance the quality of life. What I have thought about a lot with the commentary that has come in front of us over the last few years is people who are tenants of courtyards are having a lot of issues with driving business into the inside of the courtyard.
Yes.
And because of that, there's a lot of pressure put on this body to amp up signage to get people inside the courtyards. Okay? And so when I read this, I thought, well, we're just creating more of our own problem here. Can we change this language from courtyards to just plain outdoor spaces so that we don't force a developer to create a donut, which then basically amplifies our problems?
Well, and a good example of how it works well is over at the Home Connection building, kind of across from Hotel Cork there. They actually had to get a zoning variance to move the building back a little bit so the face wasn't right up to the street to allow, way back in the day, because they were, yeah, because the
That's what we have
standards
here, the
were
history book.
pull it up to the street, like the new, New Harbor area. Yes, so that created that kind of exterior courtyard, but it fronts the building. So I think your comment is really well said and well thought out.
That's fine by me if you want to just call it outdoor.
Yeah.
Outdoor
space,
Yeah.
courtyards. But
Yeah.
again, the language is lifted off from the general plan specifically.
I know.
It is, yeah, and
the
we
design
know.
I know. but
One thing to keep in mind,
Okay.
and if you want to make the change, hey, be my guest. One thing to keep in mind is remember that while you're the DRC, and yes, you get a lot of the signage people, ultimately, in the end, this is a function of the free market. No one told a business owner to locate in the courtyard.
That's Right.
They
I-
understand before prior to signing the
Yeah.
lease.
I'm a big tenant. I know that. But
Yeah.
what I'm trying to articulate here is if we continue to say that courtyards are important to us as a village concept, then people will continue to bring courtyards. And we're not saying that it's a must-have.
Right.
No.
So outdoor space is
Outdoor
appropriate.
spaces.
And I would even quantify
Outdoor
this.
Right. So
You-
I'm just trying to create actually more flexibility for said developer.
I would actually
Yeah.
even quantify that as usable outdoor space.
Yes.
And the reason
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
is because, oh, God, I'm putting my evil developer hat on. Outdoor space could be calculated as
Yeah.
I design a building, but then I got nothing in the back. That's not even accessible.
Right.
So, but that's technically outdoor
Yeah.
space.
Yeah, yeah.
Understood.
I agree
Yeah,
with you.
no, that's good.
Usable
It's
and
a good
or
comment.
publicly accessible
Yes.
is actually
Yeah.
the
All
better
the
way of
rest
putting
of
it.
the language is good. It's
Yep.
just that I felt that when we continue to push it, again, in G, we say developments are encouraged to include courtyards.
Yeah.
So I don't
And-
know that we want to do that. We want to encourage
again,
outdoor
Publicly
seating and
accessible
gatherings.
outdoor
Yeah,
space is
right.
probably should
Yep.
be the
Okay.
terminology. And if everyone can concur with that, I'll
Yes.
be glad to make that change.
Did the logic make sense to you guys?
Yes.
Okay.
Getting back to my question, in the general plan, or I haven't seen it in here, is there any reference to trees?
Yes.
No, there's not in terms of the tree space, and that's where the landscaping portion begins to come in. Is
Publicly accessible outdoor spaces.
there? This question actually gets brought up. Does the city have a tree planting list? No. Does the city have a oak tree ordinance? No. All these things need to.
You could just copy the county.
I could,
with it.
but at the same token, it's very.
No, it's more nuanced,
It's
I
it's
think.
way it's a little bit more nuanced in terms of I need to now rope in public works. We need to have a little bit more understanding because if we're for street trees and certain tree types, public works doesn't like certain trees to be planted. That is
Well,
directly
I'm also referring to taking them down, like people helping people. That giant oak tree is now gone.
right. And again, that's because we don't have a native tree ordinance,
Disappeared.
and that becomes a larger policy discussion from a council level. At this point, the council is not
Pass it on, please.
greenlit that. And we can, but it's
I-
a lot harder these days to do
Yeah,
that
I
thing.
echo that concern. And so trees in the general plan are addressed in creating an urban canopy,
Right.
not specifics about trees, and really would be great to have that for
Because
our,
it is a design element. as
a
well.
huge design element, and there's maintenance, and there's scale and form, and, that you need a professional to do stuff like that. Okay,
Moving on.
we're making good progress. We're on page, what do you say, 30, we're going into the missions district now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
38.
I would like to echo Dennis's comments in regards to page 40 and 41,
Yeah.
6C, 6D, dormers and gables. I don't think those ornamental details should be listed under mission style. That doesn't mean they can't be used. It means that they're just not consistent with what
Right.
is commonly known
So you have to
as.
qualify it. If you're going to leave it in, you have to.
Lot of
Yeah,
qualify.
you have to do something.
I say just nix it.
Yeah, I said just to remove it was my comments I'd written before this evening. It just isn't consistent.
One thing before that, I don't know why or what the rationale was changing eaves of roofing in the mission from 12 to maximum 20, or I don't know if that changed or not, but there was something about eaves.
Oh, that was in Danish,
Okay.
and I don't know.
So in the mission style, there are overhangs, there are shaded walkways that are part of the roof line. So I didn't see that, and I wanted to at least address that there is a condition in that style where the roof continues down over a walkway.
It's under arches and arcades.
It is?
Yeah, they're encouraged,
Okay, so that would be considered an arcade?
very much so.
As opposed to the roofing with the maximum of 24 inches?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah,
All
'cause
right.
from a,
From the
pri-
wall
from a wall out
Yeah.
and the roof, that's considered an arcade overhang, if you really want to get building
Yeah,
technical.
right.
Yeah.
That's,
Okay, I
that's,
just want to make sure.
and again, that's part of the design handbook ultimately in the end, because
Okay.
that will define arcade to clearly
Okay, perfect.
include that.
Then I'm.
But yes,
great.
very much a part of the Spanish
Okay.
revival.
On the roofing for here, D item, the second and the fourth items there, some of that verbiage seems like it could be incorporated into the Danish, where we were talking about different roofing materials, concrete tiles. It wouldn't necessarily be to mimic the traditional clay tiles, and fiber cement tiles should be incorporated in that section as options as well.
But we were saying to eliminate the clay tile, the
Right.
S tile from the village.
Right.
Right.
So, well, okay, so that was a question. How many, when we go through, I did not go walking through town and looking at
We
how many
have
have
some.
S tiles.
We have some.
We do
Yeah,
have some. And
definitely.
those aren't S
I mean,
tiles.
they're not S, but we have
Okay,
some.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so there's an example here of a concrete.
Yeah.
Isn't that what that is? Yeah.
It's not the Mediterranean tile.
No, it's not an S tile. It's just
Yeah.
a
So it's more,
articulated concrete tile in a color.
right. And I think that option needs to stay on
Yeah, in village.
in village. And the same with, the fiber cement and I guess,
Yeah.
to me, concrete and fiber cement are pretty
Yeah.
close. And I'm
They're-
not sure,
They're different weights.
yeah.
Hence why they're there.
different
Yeah,
weights, yeah.
right, which is why there are two different items here. So to incorporate those two materials with the caveats that we just spoke of for the Danish design. And then just to reiterate, remove dormers, remove gables. The private residential space, yes, let's increase that if you think that's suitable for that area, because we're talking more about new construction in that space as opposed to renovations that could potentially include second stories. That seems like a pretty darn small patio space for an
What we
exterior.
could do is we can break it out from, keep it, if they're proposing vertical mixed use, the 60 would be the norm. But if it's just new development, we can then up that a lot more.
I'm very comfortable with that. I think that's quality of life, yeah, in
Right.
mission.
In mission, yeah, because again,
Yeah.
that the mission has a lot more redevelopment opportunities.
Right.
So okay.
And then I do have a series of typo and
Yeah,
and
likewise.
format modifications.
Yeah.
Just the regs stuff.
And I think Dennis was kind enough to submit it too. Are there further comments for staff or, comments in general for this item here, 4C, from the committee here?
No, I'm good.
I want to thank everybody up here and staff for taking all these comments in and also allowing us the period to submit information, because I spent a lot of time on that and I saw a lot of that incorporated in, and I sent Raphael all kinds of questions in the little comment capacities there. So thank you for addressing those and incorporating those. It's a lot of work, and we recognize that, and we also look forward to being able to utilize, to have these utilized and make our job easier. So with that, I don't believe there's anything that needs a vote here. We've given you a pile of recommendations, and we'll give you physical papers to go with that. And then we're going to move on at this point to item 5 and committee member comments. Do we have any comments up here? The only comment I had is that I noted that the Denmarket Square project has been withdrawn. And I would like to ask staff what options there are for addressing the Little Mermaid fountain at that, because it's such a significant piece of our, cultural history here in our community. And I would like to ask if we could make a request of the owner to bring that back to a better condition sooner rather.
Water fountain, no?
Well, I'm not sure what he can and can't do, but it can certainly be in better condition than it is now, preferably a fountain. And I understand that the building may be going through some modifications, but I would like to see if there's an option that fountain and that area could be restored to better condition as soon as possible. The goal being Danish days.
Esther, do you mean withdrawn escrow closed or withdrawn?
The project design has been withdrawn.
For remodeling?
That is my understanding
Just to be clear.
from the project report that we received from staff.
Just to be clear.
Yeah. The remodel, renovation. Yeah. That is my request. Okay, so staff, comments?
So yes, Stone Market Square has been formally withdrawn. So what that means is the proposed the proposed application that came with it is dead. They're not moving forward with the proposed hotel and remodel. Now, the applicant has provided with city staff what we call an interior tenant improvement to divide up some of the larger existing spaces, but that's an interior tenant improvement, no outdoor improvements, therefore it's exempt from coming to DRC. So it's just mainly held through a building permit process and review, ensure parking, et cetera. As for projects, as for project updates of other projects that are ongoing, we haven't, I know the last meeting we had with the Rossman's building, the murals, there were 3 murals that were removed. City staff sent the property owner a notice of violation, and city staff did get the ability to go into the building with the project applicant and the owner to go over potential code violations. And so we are sending out a letter based on those discussions in terms of what needs to get done from a building permit perspective. There were no violations that were found, but just what was walked through about what the vision was for the building. We're going to advise on what the permitting process is. As for the murals themselves, unfortunately, one mural was destroyed. However, city staff did a request from the property owner, and the property owner did give city staff the remaining 2 murals. So those are now being stored at the wastewater treatment plant in our cargo storage areas. So what we are going to do with that, we don't know. That's a discussion to have with the potential city council and or this body. So we will need to figure out what to do with our 2 murals, but they do need some bit of work to them and sort of restoration. I have a couple ideas, but we'll try to get some council input on what to do with those.
I think the annex could look really nice with a couple of murals on it.
Yeah, it's funny. Great minds think alike. So it's.
I maybe got that idea from that guy over there.
With that being said, there's been no resubmittal of that application, so we're waiting a resubmittal in terms of colors and other progress on there. We did get a resubmittal, however, on the old bank building. So they are seeking an amendment to their larger project, so they are trying to scale it down based on the potential renovation costs. So that's in city staff review now. We'll see where it gets to. I'm going to assume it'll potentially be ready for DRC in September. And then we have Site C, Wildwood, that is also in city staff review. And we will be kicking out a letter before August 30th on that. And as a reminder to our DRC members and our Planning Commission members, be very mindful of any social media comments and or signing of petitions or any other items related to that project, and all projects in particular, but that one very much in particular, simply because it is tending towards the path of going to be appealed and all the fun stuff that go with it. I still will confer with our city attorney about when this body will hear only the lighting and landscaping portions of it. So we'll see where that goes and where it heads. But again, that's in city staff review, and it's sort of as a reminder, it's not approved. It is not at this point in juncture deemed even complete. There been no environmental studies that are done. Those are still need to get done. So the project is what I consider a long ways from getting to public hearings at this point. We did receive a pre-application review. I think I mentioned this at your last meeting for Copenhagen. So this one, the applicant was so gracious to basically allow them to be our guinea pigs for how the new pre-application review process will be. So that's in our review. I actually met with Public Works about it today for a little bit, and then working with our utilities consultant and giving them a whole sub-series and set of comments. And so the hope is that will actually, you will get exactly what I described tonight is a staff report. And it'll be interesting because that one in particular will compare both codes together. And then the applicant does understand that the codes are in flux. The applicant actually has made a good stride in terms of meeting the potential new code. So that's something that I applaud the applicant for, particularly for an all residential project, to try to attempt the new code. Unfortunately, they have the version from July. So as I've told them before, it's flux, so it is what it is. But it's a good attempt. So we're going to probably take that to you guys as well in a pre-application review, and that's definitely will be your ability to really, again, as shared by this body, sort of be that voice for our community, and the hope is our pre-applications will now be solidified, and more developers will use that process because it's a much easier process, because what we give back is an actual letter, not only from a code perspective, but it's actually the other piece of the coin is infrastructure. So sidewalks, utilities, sewer, all that stuff, and it gives the developer a lot bigger picture, and they need to tweak based on those unexpected costs that they might not have discovered had they not done the pre-application process. What I've termed this process before is the letter to yes. So that's basically your pathway to get a project approval. If you follow the T to that letter, you'll usually get in and out of our process a lot quicker. And when I've used this process in other jurisdictions, particularly on larger housing and mixed-use developments, what typical timeframes after pre-application review, they've gone from entitlement to construction in less than 9 months. So developers who are very serious about getting things and sticks to the ground will utilize the pre-app process. And as far as that goes, I think that's we're very busy. That's all I can say. You do have at least one item for next month that we got to sign. Correct? That's going to go to you, and then obviously we'll see where we fall on the bank project and where we're at with the pre-application review. So September we would have a meeting. October, don't know yet. So, but we'll see as we go along.
I noticed that the bank project in the packet does mention a drive-through. That is not on the resubmittal. Am I correct in understanding that?
That is 100% correct. That is not on the resubmittal. That needs to get modified. The initial submittal did include what looked like a drive-through, what acted like a drive-through, but wasn't quite a drive-through. So it was creative. It was basically it was a sandwich menu board where you drive up and then you park.
That was
So yeah,
we approved.
but again, our code is clear. It's clear to an extent. The updated definitions is very clear. No menu board, no drive-through lane, no nothing. That is drive-through. So again, that's the great thing about going an updating our codes yearly is you're able to capture some things because people like to sometimes try to really get around. And again, we talked about interpretation. That essentially is an interpretation. It is me looking at it and saying, yeah, no, that's a drive-through. And then the challenge then was, well, the planning manager called it a drive-through, and then no, we're going to go with what he says. So, and then if they want to appeal that, they appeal it through the bodies. So that concludes what I got. But again, I just want to thank you guys very much for bearing with me on this process. It's been a lot.
Yeah, and we recognize that, and we're here to support you. And with that, let's adjourn the meeting at 7:19.